Mohini Kent Noon. Greetings from New Delhi. I'm Mohini Kent Noon, and I'm a proud member of the World Upshift movement. I'm also an author, a filmmaker, and charity worker. And I'm very grateful to the WUM for bringing us together from all over the world for these Equinox Meditations 2024. To spread the message of peace and harmony, to try and raise our consciousness to vibrate at a higher frequency. The equinox actually reminds us to bring balance into our lives. This is the time that day and night are in perfect balance. There is total balance between light and dark. So this is the appropriate time for remembering that it is up to us, the human race, to bring balance to the earth. The conflict in the world grows even as we speak, with new wars and the old ones escalating, new ones igniting unexpectedly. It almost seems to me sometimes as though the human race is intent on devouring itself. We humans were meant to care for the well-being of the earth, to keep the peace, to hold the peace, to nurture our junior partners, the animals on land, the creatures of the deep ocean, the rivers, trees, mountains, glaciers, and ice caps, and the very air we breathe. Instead, the world beyond the human world is totally out of balance. Nature has been seriously disturbed. The oceans are polluted, the air is polluted. Our common resources that were meant to be shared are disproportionately in the hands of a few greedy families. But now we must work, and it is time to restore the balance. And we also need to find the balance between male and female energies, and do so in a spirit of freedom, equality, and respect. Men and women are equal. The two do not exist in two separate silos and living in a state of permanent conflict. I sometimes wonder who set up the battle of the sexes and what did they profit from it? Whatever it is, we are at a different point in evolution. And we now live in knowledge economies. And here, men and women are equal because the world is not dominated by brute strength. So Mevlana Rumi wrote, the great Sufi mystic, that woman is not a creature. She is the creator. The great Guru Nanak, the founder of Sikhism, said, it is a woman that gives birth to kings and saints. So how can she be abused and pushed back into an inferior position? The divine feminine is not inferior to the divine masculine, but equal. Without the divine feminine energies of God, there would be no creation. For it is the dynamic female principle that creates all the manifest universe. The equinox is the right time to balance the equation between the genders. And the change has to start with the individual. It has to start at home. Everything else, school, office, government, authorities, institutions, come after that only. The first teachers are the parents. And the point of change is in the person, just like you and I. I created an anti-trafficking charity about 20 years ago. And I'm the founder chairperson of the Lily Against Human Trafficking. When I started doing this work, I had no idea that I would be able to make any difference at all. But we have done 32 projects in the intervening years and impacted the lives of almost 500,000 people, including the victims, families, villages, communities, and brought awareness of this evil. So hopefully, it'll have a much larger impact in terms of change of mindset. And that's one of the life lessons that I learned, that I was not too small to make a difference, and neither are you or anyone else. The outstanding Roman emperor, Marcus Aurelius, said, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being." Each one of us has to go to work as a human being to do service to the planet and all those who live in it, to bring peace, harmony, and balance. Even the energetic process of trying to be better than we are at present will add to the reservoir of consciousness. Sri Aurobindo, the great yogi, wrote, "The nature of man is to transcend himself. That is indeed his nature and the divine aim of his self-transcending." Human beings were meant to uphold the scales of justice. The earth gives us great abundance, but we are not satisfied, and we want more and more and more. And in the process, we have completely disbalanced nature. But it is our mandate to care for the well-being of the earth. But the truth is that we can only care about what we know. We only love what we know. And in order to love our blue planet, we must know about it, its nooks and crannies, and the creatures big and small who live on it. Sophisticated cameras now can bring us images of polar bears curled up in their ice caves, panda bears hidden behind bamboo forests, cubs of lions and other big cats playing in Africa, and the brilliant rainbow-colored fish who dart in and out of the coral reefs. We must look and learn from all this. And one of the best documentaries I've seen is Earth, One Amazing Day, which is narrated by Al Gore. As a filmmaker myself, I appreciate the incredible images that they have collected from around the world, including the mayfly who only lives for one day. And we are the custodians of all this beauty and all these forms of life. And now it is up to us to create that balance and harmony so that they not only survive, but they thrive. And the equinox is a perfect time to remind ourselves of this. Human beings were meant to be the guardians of the earth. And the earth is a beautiful planet if you compare it to, the images we see of Mars and the moon. But we have pitted it, soaked it with blood, hollowed out the mountains, cut the trees. And we were meant to be peacemakers. And it is time to ensure that the resources are shared by all, equality of our shared wealth in every sense, equality of love, and balance in everything. Now it is my pleasure to invite Dharmacharya Shantum Seth to speak. He is a direct disciple of the great Zen master, Thich Nhat Hanh, and was ordained by his guru as a Dharmacharya in 2001. He has been teaching and leading retreats in India and across the world, and pilgrimages under the banner of In the Footsteps of the Buddha. He is actively involved in social environment educational programs promoting mindfulness, peace, and harmony. And now he's in the process of creating another Plum village in India, the community established by Thich Nhat Hanh in France. Shantum calls it Jamun village, and it is based in Dehradun, the valley nestling at the foot of the Indian mountains. Shantum, the floor is yours.
So thank you, Mohini, for that introduction, and also for your wise words and a reminder of our responsibility as human beings at this time of planetary history, in a sense. But it's very nice to celebrate this circumambulation of the Earth around the Sun at this equinox time. I think many traditions use the practice of circumambulation. I know in the Buddhist tradition, we use the circumambulation a lot around stupas, around different pilgrimage sites. And it gives us a deeper understanding of no beginning, no end, no birth, no death, no non-being, these sort of great teachings of the Buddha. So I'm very glad that we're doing it as a sort of a planetary family, as it were, and reminding everyone right from across the world that we are actually just a small, I can't even call it a spaceship, an Earth ship, just circumambulating the sun. You know, I was going to start with the sound of the bell. A bell is we use this a lot in our meditation practices. It's called a bell of mindfulness. And when we invite the bell, we don't call it striking the bell, we invite the bell. We invite the bell to sound, and then we treat that sound as the voice of the Buddha, calling us back to our true home. And you might ask, where is our true home? And of course, we think of the true home as the here and now, in the present moment. This is the only time and place where we can have any control of anything we do on our sense of reactivity, responsiveness. So always coming back to the present is part of our practice, and the bell helps me with that. So I'll invite 3 sounds of the bell. I'll first wake up the bell, which is a half sound, and then I'll invite 3 sounds, and then just use a few breaths together. And if you're on the other side of the planet, please breathe together. We are breathing together on one earth. So let's do that for just a minute or so. Just bringing our awareness to our breath, the gentle rise and fall of the abdomen with each in-breath and each out-breath. So, dear friends, our bodies are here, wherever we are, but our minds may be somewhere else. And so what this practice does, which is the Buddha taught in the Anapanasati Sutra, the sutra on the full awareness of breathing, is to bring our mind and body back into the present moment using the anchor of the breath. Of course, this is a universal practice. It doesn't have to be a Buddhist practice. And so every human being who's alive is breathing. And so we can always come back using this methodology of coming back to our breath, coming back to our body, and then getting in touch with our feelings, our mind, our objects of mind, and so on. And this bell may be just a little bell like this right now, but in our monasteries, we invite the bell and then everyone pauses and stops together. But then one of our monasteries is in France, and we have a church very close to us. And every time the church bell rings, we also stop. It is not necessarily just a practice for the Buddhist bell, as it were. There's no discrimination on bells. And I find that we can use this also in a secular way. I remember my teacher teaching, my teacher is the Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh, and he taught us how we could use a telephone as a form of a meditation bell. So now every time the phone rings, I never pick it up for at least 3 times. And with the first bell, I just stop. I just stop what I'm doing. If I'm speaking, if I'm walking, if I'm eating, I might place my fork down. And then the second breath, I'm back to my breath. And the third breath, I smile. And then nowadays you can even see whose name it is, who's coming up. And you can say, oh, hello, Mohini, or hello, my dear friend, or hello, my daughter. Or, so whoever it is, and you're really present for that person. And even before calling, you might want to say, oh, my words can travel thousands of miles. May they be as beautiful as flowers. May they be coming out of a space of compassion. And you ring somebody, so you always picture somebody. You have that sort of mental space of love as you pass those words across the, ether. And if the other person's doing telephone meditation too, then what's very nice is that they're also stopping and breathing, and you get another chance to come back to your breath and be present. So it's a sort of co-practice. And I feel that's sort of how we breathe together and practice together with something which is really universal. I was talking to Mohini earlier, and she was saying, why didn't you tell us how you came to this practice? And very briefly, I was a political activist, sort of organizing large demonstrations, going to jail, organizing, in a sort of, in a Gandhian way. I was very inspired by Gandhiji, Mahatma Gandhi, but still there was a lot of anger in me. And I then burnt out. And I felt, is there a way of being peace rather than just fighting for peace? And that led me for about 5-6 years through many, many different traditions. I was born in a Hindu family, so starting there and then moving to other traditions, including the Christian tradition, the Sufi tradition for a brief while, tribal traditions. But slowly my sort of, I would say my propensity led me to the Buddha Dharma. I think that was, I have a rather sort of agnostic view on things sometimes, and also questioning view. So it led me there. And I also really found the teachings on interconnectedness, of interbeing, that there's no such thing as an independently existing I, that suited my intellectual understanding. And then I found a practice of mindfulness that allowed me to not just calm my mind, but to look at my mental states like anger and then transform them. In a way, cultivate, using that sort of analogy of the compost and the flowers, to sort of cultivate my mind to be a more peaceful mind. And then I realized that it is possible, and there is a degree of self-reliance in that. You can do it. But what is also interesting for me in that was that realizing that in the Buddha Dharma, for me, that it started with the primacy of suffering. And both being a political activist and also finding suffering in my own life, I felt it was important to start at that point. But then through the teachings and the practice to realize that suffering is, as I said, if you use it as a healthy compost, we can actually transform it quite to happiness and peace. So I went to many teachers, in the Burmese tradition, in the Tibetan tradition, in the Korean tradition, the Japanese tradition. And then at one point, I was actually at a retreat for artists at the Ojai Foundation in California. And there, a teacher called Thich Nhat Hanh was coming to lead a retreat. And I felt that when I saw him sitting down, he felt a bit like a feather sitting on a cushion. When he walked, he looked like as if he was gliding. So I was sort of quite intrigued. I'd never heard of him before. I just come to that retreat, I was actually on staff. And the second day, he led us in what is called walking meditation, mindful walking. And he instructed us to really to use our breath and our step in harmony, being aware that as we breathe, we might take one step or two steps or three steps, depending on how long our breath is, and the same with the out breath. And just maybe using a word like, I have arrived, I'm home, in the here and in the now. So this sort of practice of just arriving in every moment with our step was quite a revolution for me. I feel for the first time I really touched peace, not as an idea, as a concept that I was sort of fighting for, but something that was visceral in me. And I realized that this is something which all of us do. We all walk. And I can do this every day. I just have to remember to be present with every step and putting my mindfulness with each step rather than my worry or my anxiety or my anger. And in that way, I felt, yes, I've met a teacher who I could learn from. So I came back to India, and I was brought up in India all my life, yeah, most of my life. And I wrote him a letter saying, Thai, we call him Thai. Thich Nhat Hanh's Thai is like a teacher. If you're ever wanting to come to India, if I can help in any way. So it so happened he'd written a book called Old Path, White Clouds at the time. It's a sort of biography of the Buddha. And it's a wonderful book. And he wanted to sort of come back to the pilgrimage sites and visit the Buddha, as it were. So he asked me whether I would organize such a journey. And for me, it was a great gift, spending more than a month visiting the Buddha, but holding hands with Thich Nhat Hanh, going to all these places. And he really brought alive the Buddha as a human being to me. I've been brought up thinking of the Buddha a little bit like a god, maybe an incarnation of Vishnu, but the Buddha was a human being. And that was a very important teaching for me. And it's what, like Mohini said, we're all human beings. That's where we start. And that's a common base for all of us, 8 billion human beings. And the Buddha was the same. And what I also realized is that the Buddha was not teaching any theory or ideology or philosophy. He was teaching from his own experience. And so was Thich Nhat Hanh. So as we took walks at these places, walking mindfully at all these sites, I really felt that I was coming home to my own Indic civilizational tradition, which was part of our DNA in a sort of way. And this practice of mindfulness that we were doing, in everything we were doing, he was teaching us when we were eating, when we were speaking, when we were looking at something, he was saying, bring that energy of mindfulness in everything you do. And it is an energy, again, that exists in every human being. But how to really practice it, how to cultivate that energy of mindfulness, that awareness of being present to what is happening within you and around you. So that's how I loved the journey. And then at the end of the journey, Thich Nhat Hanh said, well, you should do this every year as a practice. This is what the Buddha suggested 2,600 years ago, that pilgrimage is a practice. So from that time, from 1988 onwards, I started going on pilgrimage every year as a practice. And it was like meeting my own teacher every time when visiting, say, the deer park and in Sarnath, and sitting there and hearing, and now not just hearing, but actually teaching now the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, realizing that this was the pathway to overcome suffering, or going to Vaishali, where the first nuns were ordained. And again, as Mohini said, we have the feminine and the masculine, and the Buddha was saying, yes, they both have the ability to awaken. There's no difference in that ability to awaken. And going to Shravasti, where he taught about the breathing, or Kushinagar, where he was passing away and realizing, and not realizing, but saying in his last teachings, please be attentive that everything is to pass. Everything will pass is impermanent. And in this way, then he said, okay, now also why don't you, and then, just sitting under the Bodhi tree, listening to the rustle of the leaves, crossing the river he crossed, sitting in the caves that he sat, breathing with the Buddha. And then he said, okay, why don't you do this every year? And then even do this as a form of right livelihood, which is a sort of one of the eightfold path. And so in this way, I think Thich Nhat Hanh provided me a path for my own life, but also a path to offer to others. And in this sort of way, then to study the sutras, to meet the people the Buddha met, the children that he met, the farmers that he met, the artisans that he met, and then to see the context of his teachings really brings the teachings of the Buddha so much more alive. And when every summer I would then go to Plum Village, which is the center in France, and I would realize how important it was to develop the fourfold Sangha of the monks, the nuns, the laymen, and the laywomen. It was like and Thich Nhat Hanh was always emphasizing the Sangha. And I remember once when we were doing walking meditation, he gave us a little sticker and said something like, "I walk for you." And we stuck it in all our shoes. And it's true, when we walk into a matrix like that, a vortex like that, we are all teaching each other. Everyone who's doing walking meditation is helping somebody else to do walking meditation too. And so the practice becomes a collective practice. And also the shift in consciousness is a collective shift in consciousness. And I think that is what the hope of WUM and others are, is that how do we shift not just the individual consciousness, but a collective consciousness towards making this a much more better world in whatever way we can. And then some years later, I married, and Thich Nhat Hanh married my wife and me in Plum Village. And it's very interesting because here's a monk also giving us a path of practice as lay people, and suggested something called the 5 awarenesses, which we recite every full moon, and telling us, do this every full moon. And so like now, when we're remembering the moon, the sun cycle, as it were, we also remember the moon cycle. And every month we say, okay, the full moon, and then we come back to our marriage vows or the 5 awarenesses. And then teaching us different practices of how to create harmony in the family, how to create, which are taken from the monastic tradition, but then offered to laity. A practice called beginning anew, for example, where we water each other's flowers, and then we also, sort of say good things to each other. We offer our regrets, and then if you're hurt about something, then we then share that with compassion. So thank you very much for offering the space, and I do hope that we can celebrate our transit together. Thank you very much. I'll close with the sound of the bell so that we can then come back to our breath.
Thank you, Shantum, for reminding us of our magical relationship of the earth with the sun, without which nothing can grow. And as you know, I've written a book on the great Buddhist Nagarjuna, and which one of the central principles is, of course, of interdependence, and so interdependence and peace and balance and all, I think, belong in the same spectrum. Because if there is peace, as you brought us to peace in your meditation, but peace in the individual, then and that spreads, that can spread as much as hatred. And that would actually create more balance in the world. And that's a wonderful book you mentioned, Old Path, New Clouds. I've been distributing it in London and trying to talk about walking meditation in Regent's Park. And now we are creating a global community through WUM. So we hope to do a lot more work, and we'll join in again. Thank you.